We see this as an opportunity for growth, of course. That was the first sentence. No greeting, no warning. Just a corporate prelude to a slap in the face. The room was too quiet for 900 a.m. Tuesday, I sat across from Craig in the glass conference pod they'd just installed last quarter. Open design. No blinds like they wanted the whole office to see who was being summoned and who wasn't. He had the kind of smile you'd expect from someone pretending this was just a tough conversation. But I could already see the manila folder before he slid it forward, labeled in bold compensation adjustments. Q4 strategic plan. Craig leaned back, fingers steepled like he was about to pitch a TED Talk. "You've been instrumental to our enterprise accounts," he said. "Truly. But as we optimize for efficiency, we're asking key leaders to lead by example. That means accepting a temporary 42% reduction." I blinked once. Twice. Not because I didn't hear him, but because I didn't want him to hear me breathe too hard. My name is Harper. I've been with Ardentix since year 2, long before Craig showed up with his MBA smile and spreadsheet buzzwords. I built the enterprise pipeline, closed the first 7-figure deal, onboarded every key client in the system. But none of that mattered this morning, because now apparently leadership meant being the first to bleed. He ended with the kind of phrase they love to throw in for flavor. "If this isn't something you feel aligned with, we understand, but we'll have to revisit your role." A threat dressed in polyester language. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him of the hours or the numbers or the names on the wall outside the ones I'd brought in. I simply reached for the pen on the table. My hand trembled slightly just for a second. Then I gripped it tightly and let a small professional smile stretch across my lips. Craig smiled back, relieved. He thought I was agreeing. He had no idea what I was really thinking. He smiled. I didn't. The hallway outside that glass conference room still echoed with Craig's voice, even after I'd left temporary reduction, strategic move. "You're a leader." I walked back to my desk like nothing happened, my smile still faint professional. But my mind wasn't in the office anymore. It was in that tiny 2-room space we once called headquarters, before Ardentix had sleek logos and catered lunches. Back then, there was no Craig, just me, 2 engineers and Ryan, the founder, the dreamer, the guy who couldn't write a pitch deck but could talk about future-proof platforms until sunrise. He didn't know how to invoice a client, but he knew I could figure it out, so I did. 3 months, no pay. Just ramen, gas station coffee, and a mattress I kept behind the server rack. I slept there more times than I want to admit, not because I didn't have options, but because I believed in what we were building. The CRM system, that was me. The spreadsheets, the onboarding flow, the pitch to our first real client. Me. I was 26, broke and terrified, and I was all in. I remember the night I signed the contract with our first major account. Ryan and I had just come back from a meeting that went better than expected. We didn't have legal support yet, so I drafted the whole thing myself on my laptop sitting on the floor next to the router. He looked at me and said, "If this thing actually works, Harper, you'll be the foundation, the one we build it all on." I smiled like a kid who just got picked first in gym class. And you know what? For a while he meant it. He gave me space, autonomy. I built the systems, the relationships, the culture. I became the person clients called first, and the person who never got credit in the press releases. Then came growth. Then came layers. Then came Craig with his performance reviews, his optimization plans, and that ever-present tone of someone who thinks they discovered the wheel when they're just riding it downhill. And now I'm told I'm lucky to still be here if I accept a 42% cut, of course. I'm supposed to feel grateful. But here's the thing. I'm still proud of what I built, of who I was when no one was watching, when no one was promising a raise or a bonus or a better title. That version of me, she was unstoppable, and maybe they forgot her. But I didn't. Turns out they built the empire on my back, then cut me off at the knees. People expect rage. When you're wronged, they think you'll slam doors, flip desks, make a scene. But the most dangerous kind of anger doesn't yell. It waits. I didn't quit. Not yet. The morning after Craig handed me that insult wrapped in corporate ribbon, I showed up early, wore navy, tied my hair back, brought donuts for the team. They thought I was fine, maybe even loyal. But inside, I was already moving away quietly. I sat at my desk, just like always, and logged into the admin console of our CRM. My name still had the crown icon, full access master credentials, no expiration, no oversight. Nobody had ever updated it, probably because they forgot who built it in the first place. I downloaded everything. Client portfolios, payment histories, contract versions, all the raw communications. Clean, organized folders, labeled, encrypted, quietly uploaded to a private drive they didn't know existed. In between meetings, I reviewed every contract I'd ever signed on behalf of Ardentix. There were more than I remembered. Some of them still named me as the authorized point of contact. A few hadn't even been transferred to corporate signatory amateurs. At lunch, I sat with the team laughing politely at jokes I'd heard 100 times. They didn't notice how I stopped taking notes, stopped participating in brainstorming sessions. I wasn't adding ideas. I was taking inventory. By 4 p.m., I was in the archives room, pulling old vendor record systems we'd used. Vendors. We dropped the gaps. No one remembered except the person who set them up, me. Every step I took looked like routine maintenance, but under the surface, I was stitching together the map of their weakest points. No one suspected a thing. Not Craig, who passed me in the hallway with his usual condescension. Not the interns who still came to me with questions because I knew where everything actually was. Not even the IT guy who once asked me if I could help him find something in the back end. I built the back end. That entire week, I smiled. I held meetings, sent reports, gave status updates like everything was normal. But when I got home, I'd open my laptop and finish what I'd started, one file at a time, one connection at a time, one quiet, strategic withdrawal at a time. Because I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away in silence, and I wasn't leaving empty-handed, I was leaving armed. I didn't schedule the lunch. It was already on the calendar, an account check-in with Devin Blake, Director of Ops at Kelridge Systems. One of our oldest clients. One of mine. The restaurant was the same as always, neutral lighting, overpriced salads, quiet booths. We met there quarterly to align strategy, but those meetings had always been more than business. Devin and I had spent 7 years building trust over coffee and contract revisions. He knew my instincts. I knew his hesitations before he even voiced them. This time, though, he watched me more than he listened. I gave the usual update, current project pacing, cross-functional integrations, future projections. Every word measured, every sentence safe. He didn't interrupt, but when I paused for water, he leaned forward slightly and said, "You're not okay." It wasn't a question, and I didn't deny it. I simply folded my hands in my lap and said, "There's been a shift internally." That was all I gave him. No names, no complaints, no bitterness. Just a truth quietly placed on the table. He exhaled slowly. I figured the emails feel colder, like someone else is talking through you. He studied my face. Are you leaving? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence said enough. After a long pause, he reached across the table and placed a steady hand on my forearm. Harper, if you go, we follow. That was it. No negotiation, no drama, just a line drawn in absolute clarity. I felt something catch in my throat. Not sadness, not even relief. Something deeper. Validation. For years I'd shown up not just to sell, but to solve. I'd answered calls at midnight, pulled weekends, walked them through product crashes and executive tantrums, but I'd never known if it really mattered, if I mattered, or just the Ardentic's name behind me. And now I had my answer. I didn't trash the company. I didn't need to. Devon saw what was happening from the outside, the shift in tone, the layers of detachment, the slow erosion of intention. He finished his drink and stood. Then, almost like an afterthought, he placed a hand on my shoulder. "We don't work with systems. We work with people. Don't forget that." I nodded, unable to speak. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt seen. As I walked back to the office, my steps felt different, like something had shifted inside me, not out of vengeance, out of clarity. Their loyalty was never to the logo, it was to the person who showed up for them. The office looks different at night. No voices, no phones, just the low hum of machines that never sleep. It was 11:04 p.m. when I stepped off the elevator badge, still active cameras, still blinking red to green. No alarms, no questions. After all, I had clearance. Too much of it. I walked past the "We Are Ardentics" mural without looking at it. I wasn't there for sentiment. I was there for leverage. The servers were housed in the east wing 2 floors down from the executive suites where Craig liked to stage manage his mornings. I took the back corridor, key-carded in, and sat at the same terminal I'd used 10 years ago when we only had 6 clients and 1 rusty firewall. Now the system was sprawling, layered, bloated from years of patches and politics, but I still knew the core. My fingers hovered over the keyboard just for a moment, then I began. Step 1. Access audit. I identified every user with administrative privileges and began revoking them quietly, one by one. No alerts, just a slow erasure of their authority. Step 2. Data backup. I exported every active contract payment trail and project file into a secure private cloud under legal compliance. Not stolen, just preserved. The originals would remain, of course, but access, that was changing. Step 3. Firewall lockdown. I initiated a sequence that disabled remote logins from external devices. Craig's laptop, the CFO's tablet, the consultants they'd outsourced last month. By the time they realized it, the doors would already be sealed. Every click was surgical, every move traceable, yet defensible. I wasn't deleting, I wasn't destroying, I was containing. And the whole time my heart raced like I was defusing a bomb. But my hands steady. At 11:52 p.m., I opened the CRM's master settings, one menu most people didn't even know existed. From there, I reset the primary encryption key. One key. One keystroke. A cold wave passed over me as I hit enter. The system blinked. Not crashed, just paused, like it knew something had shifted. A second later, the screen refreshed. Every command I had queued was now active. The system didn't scream. It didn't fight back. It simply obeyed the hands that once built it. I sat back in the chair, breathing slowly, calm, focused. This wasn't revenge. It was design. By midnight, I'd wiped my fingerprints clean, cleared browser history, logged out of the admin shell like I was just another late-night analyst catching up on reports. I walked out the same way I walked in. No one saw me, no one stopped me, but tomorrow they'd feel it. One keystroke, and the empire blinked. At 7:46 a.m., Craig's inbox chimed with a new message. It came from my address. It had no subject line. It had no greeting, just one sentence. "You may want to check your access." That was all. No anger, No accusations, no passive-aggressive phrasing or legal threats, just a simple notification as calm and cold as morning steel. I'd scheduled the send the night before, just minutes after finishing the lockdown. I'd timed it to arrive right before his daily huddle with the ops team, just as he'd be booting up his dashboard to display client retention metrics. Calculated, absolutely, but not malicious. Precision isn't cruelty, it's clarity. I didn't stick around to watch him open it. I wasn't in the building that morning. Instead, I sat in my apartment by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the early sunlight paint soft streaks across my hardwood floor. My laptop was still open. The screen dimmed slightly, the cursor blinking at the end of that one line. I didn't type anything else, didn't edit, didn't overthink it. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen as it slowly faded to black, like the final shot of a film where the hero walks off frame, silent and unbothered. It felt like that. Not revenge, not victory, just closure. He would open the system and find the locks reset, the pathways, close the access denied. The CRM would no longer respond to his credentials. The files he thought he controlled would request new authorization. Admin logs would show nothing out of order because technically everything done was within scope. The digital footprint, clean. The legal grounds, untouchable. Let them dig. Let them panic. There was nothing illegal, nothing traceable as sabotage, just a slow rebalancing of power they never realized had shifted. And somewhere between SIP 3 and 4, I realized something else. I wasn't shaking. The Harper from a month ago would have second-guessed, would have wondered if this was too far or too soon, but that Harper was gone. This one. She didn't need validation. I closed the laptop with a soft click and exhaled. No adrenaline, no triumph, just stillness. A strange kind of stillness, the kind that comes after the storm, even if no one else knew it had passed yet. Craig would not immediately, but soon. He'd feel the ripple. He'd trace the silence. He'd see the single sentence sitting in his inbox and understand it wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. No curse words, no threats, just the quiet before collapse. It started quietly. An account manager couldn't access the CRM. Then another. By 8:30, the operations floor was buzzing, phones in the air, voices clipped and rising. Password resets failed. Admin panels returned. Blank reports didn't load. Craig arrived at 8:37, coffee in hand, confusion already creasing his brow. "Why is marketing locked out?" he asked, walking toward the glass conference room. No one answered. Then came the second wave client calls. 3 within the first 10 minutes. "Our portal credentials are invalid. We received a termination notice. Was that intentional? We'd like to speak with Harper." By 8:51, Craig was no longer holding his coffee. He'd placed it on the nearest table and forgotten about it. His voice cut across the floor like a whip. "Where is Harper? Get it in here now." In the server room, 2 junior engineers were already hunched over terminals trying to trace access logs. The head of infrastructure arrived 10 minutes later, hair unbrushed, tie undone, panic barely concealed behind professional phrasing. "Someone initiated a multi-layer credential lockout at the root level," he said flatly. Craig blinked. In English, admin permissions have been revoked. Not just reassigned, erased. Whoever did this had full system access. Not even super user override works, then reset it. We can't. The keys are tied to an authorization protocol that traces back to Harper. Craig froze. "She revoked us." "No, she owned it. Still does. Most of the contracts, especially our legacy enterprise accounts, they're still under her name as signatory. Legally, we can't touch those without her." A long, terrible silence followed. Across the floor, someone dropped a phone. A client had just pulled out $112 million in recurring revenue gone in a single sentence. By 10:00 a.m., 4 more clients had requested immediate offboarding. 2 others asked for Harper directly bypassing their account reps entirely. Craig stood in his office, fists clenched, watching the company he'd optimized unravel in real time. Every system he thought he controlled was slipping through his fingers like sand. He called legal, he called HR, he called compliance. They all had the same answer. "We need to speak with Harper." Outside, the morning sun was blinding. Inside, everything was breaking. Desks were deserted, Slack channels frozen, executives whispering behind closed doors. The open concept floor plan had turned into a battlefield of denial and dread. Someone asked if we'd been hacked, but there was no breach, no data stolen, no system corrupted. The company wasn't hacked. It was simply reclaimed. The call came just past midnight. I was already awake. Not because I was anxious, far from it. I was calm in a way that felt almost unreal. The kind of calm that only arrives when you've burned every bridge on purpose and still know exactly where you're going next. The phone vibrated once Craig Parker. The name lit up on my screen like an aftershock. I let it ring twice before answering Harper. His voice cracked on the second syllable. "We need to talk." I said nothing. "I don't understand." He continued faster now, like he was chasing his own breath. "This isn't fair. Why would you do this?" There it was. Not a question of what I did. He already knew, not how, but why. I took a slow breath, steady and full. My voice didn't shake. "You wrote the rules," I said quietly. I just followed them. There was a pause. A long one. On the other end, I could hear the faint sound of papers being shuffled. Maybe contracts, maybe chaos, maybe denial. "You could have said something," he tried again. "You could have come to me," I did, I replied. "You just didn't hear it because I didn't beg." More silence, and then came the unraveling, the part where power drains from a man who never thought he'd lose it. "You built this place," Craig said, his voice soft now, almost mournful. "But you're destroying it." "No," I corrected him. "You destroyed it the moment you thought I was disposable." He had no response to that, just breathing. Uncertain, uneven. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized I wasn't angry anymore, not even bitter. I was done. This wasn't revenge, it was release. I stood by the window, staring out at the empty street below. The city lights flickered across the glass, but all I saw was reflection. I didn't need validation from him. I didn't need closure wrapped in apologies or panic. What I had now was better control. Control of my time, control of my worth, control of what came next. Craig finally spoke again, barely above a whisper. "So what now?" I let the silence stretch between us like a canyon. Then I said, "Now I move on, and you clean up what's left." I ended the call. No rage, no satisfaction, scream, just a quiet click, the sound of finality. He thought he'd backed me into a corner. I was already holding the exit key. The first morning at the new office felt nothing like the old ones. No fluorescent buzz. No empty catchphrases on the walls. Just a sunlit workspace filled with quiet focus and soft laughter. Real people doing real work without performance theater. They didn't give me a corner office. I didn't ask for one. They gave me trust. Civica was smaller, leaner, a consultancy built by former insiders who'd had enough of bloated hierarchies and hollow mission statements. When I walked into my onboarding meeting, the CEO, Amira, stood up and said, "You don't need to prove anything here. We know who you are." I didn't smile. Not out of coldness, just out of disbelief. No one had said those words to me in years. By noon, I had 6 missed calls. 3 from clients who had already reached out to Civica asking if I was really there. 2 had contracts ready. The 6th was Devin from Kelridge Systems, who didn't even ask for a presentation. He just said, "We're in. You tell us where to sign." It wasn't dramatic. There were no banners, no headlines, no viral LinkedIn posts, just quiet transitions, smooth handovers, mutual understanding between professionals who knew who had really been showing up for them all along. By the end of the week, 6 former Ardentix accounts were now mine, no NDAs broken, no bridges burned, just movement. And while Craig and his board scrambled to restore confidence, I was too busy building something that didn't require saving. Every call I took, every client I welcomed, reminded me of who I'd been before all the politics, before I'd been asked to shrink, before I'd been told to lead by example by sacrificing the value I'd spent a decade creating. Now no one asked me to prove I belonged. They just listened and followed. And that was the greatest victory of all. Not the collapse behind me, but the construction ahead. I didn't need them to fail. They did that on their own, by forgetting what mattered. But here in this quiet new chapter, I remembered. I remembered what it felt like to be trusted, to be heard, to be chosen not because of a logo, but because of the loyalty I'd earned over years of showing up when no one else would. I didn't walk into Civica to prove anything. I walked in to begin again. And this time, I wasn't just building systems or relationships. I was building a life with the right people on the right terms. Revenge was never the goal. Building better was. When I left Ardentix for the last time, I didn't make a scene. No long speeches, no drawn-out goodbyes, no boxes stacked with desk trinkets and farewell cupcakes, just one small cardboard container, inside a silver USB drive and a 5x7 photo frame wrapped in a blue microfiber cloth. That was it. The USB held every file I had legal rights to, templates I'd built, documents I'd authored, systems I'd architected. Nothing stolen, nothing shady, just the parts that were mine. The digital imprint of 10 years of work distilled into a sliver of metal, no bigger than my thumb. The photo, that was older, a grainy snapshot from our second month in the original office. 7 of us in hoodies and mismatched chairs, grinning like fools under a flickering fluorescent light. Ryan, our idealist founder, had his arms slung around my shoulder. I still had bangs. We had no funding, no clients, no idea what we were doing, but we had belief. And in that frozen moment, no one was jockeying for titles or drafting salary cuts. We were just trying to build something that mattered. I looked at the photo one last time before slipping it into the box. My thumb traced the corner of the frame. A small crack ran through the glass. I hadn't replaced it. Somehow it felt honest. Walking through the empty lobby, I passed by the new branding wall. Bold, corporate, sterile Ardentix had grown slick, polished, but in all the shine, it had forgotten its soul. At the exit, the security guard Robert, who'd been there even before Craig, nodded. "Heading out early today, Harper." I smiled. "Yeah, for good." He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He just tipped his cap and said, "Well, they lost the best part of this place." I stepped outside. The air was crisp. A quiet wind swept past, and for a moment I stood still, box in hands, heart light. Did I feel loss? Of course, 10 years doesn't leave without leaving something behind, but regret. No, I didn't regret building Ardentix. I regretted believing they'd protect what we built together, but that was their failure, not mine. As I walked toward the curb, a black sedan pulled up. Civica had sent a car, another quiet gesture that told me I was no longer invisible. I placed the box gently on the seat beside me. One USB. One frame. That's all I needed, because sometimes walking away isn't surrender. It's clarity. It's knowing when something no longer deserves you. They kept the name. I kept the network and the proof it all started with me.